The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
Eventually I have to do like I've done with the Indie Ciders and some of my other podcasts where I use Fancy, called ChatGPT Fancy, Evan Bevins of the Screaming Boy podcast.
Does she ever let you down?
She has never. Well, that's not true. But but when she lets me down and I get agitated with her, I don't have to worry about her feelings. She lives to serve, Evan. She's my kind of woman. In any case, I am casually misogynistic. I also have done a great many logo redesigns for my podcasts, and I need to do one for Comic Strip. I also, my problem is, can I just talk to you for a minute? Can I talk to you a minute, Evan Bevins of your blog?
Just the two of us.
Asterisk 51, I believe it is.
Yes.
I really like the comic book store song. That's why I've used it. That's why I haven't really changed anything. Also, we don't do this nearly often enough for me to think about. But I love that comic book store theme,
Oh, yeah. Except the girl behind the counter, that doesn't happen very often. But
yeah, in all of your years of comic book buying, and there's been many, when did you start reading comics, Evan? 5, 6, 7?
I think, I was actually talking about this the other day, because I think my introduction may have been the little mini comics and the Masters of the Universe figures.
Yeah, didn't Jesse do like a whole thing on those?
I think so. I just got the omnibus that has all of them, because that's like, of all the things I've hoarded over the years, I only have one of those.
Really?
But yeah, so I mean, I was reading. I was actually drawing comics and having my mom write the dialogue in before I could read and write. So
wow.
And my art style has only improved slightly since then.
Yeah, I've seen your Free Willy stuff, sir. But yeah, I that's really interesting to me that you've had such a love and passion for comic books that young. I remember I got into comics probably somewhere in the middle of elementary school. I think I got into them more when I had access to a comic book store at my whim, and that was much older. I was in probably junior high, and I would ride my bike to the comic book store. And since I could go more often than my father was willing to take me, I was buying more comics. And I remember what my father said to me. He said, "Son," and I said, "Yes, Father." I called him Father. He said, "Son, don't become obsessive with this like you do everything else." I don't know where he got that from.
Doesn't really check out, but sure.
100 some odd comic books later, and I mean individual titles I was collecting, he just looked at me and, like he would many other times in my life, it was awfully disappointed. But if you were reading comics in the 90s, it was hard to not buy 76 versions of the same Wolverine comic and Spider-Man. You know what I mean, Evan?
Yeah, they tried to suck you in. I remember getting, I decided I was going to read one, maybe two X-Men books, and then within a couple months, I was buying all four of them. Such a quaint time. There were only four X-Men books.
I went back and I read Secret Wars, but the first like contemporary book crossover event that was happening as I was collecting comic books was Acts of Vengeance.
Oh my gosh, that's my favorite. That's the
Is
first.
It really?
I bought anything that had Acts of Vengeance on it. I grabbed, and I am slowly but surely going back and trying to get all the ones I didn't have. Like that's, I think most of them are available through Marvel Unlimited. So like that's when I stop bouncing around doing random and smaller things. That's my next read through for my blog. I want to go through all of Acts of Vengeance.
Did Acts of Vengeance have like a main storybook the way Secret Wars or Civil War did?
It didn't have its own series. I think the main thread ran through Avengers, which I did not read back then. I got one or two of those issues, so I only know, like, through hearsay what actually happened in Avengers. I was just, anytime I saw that that it had Acts of Vengeance, I would just grab it. But the main one that I followed was the sub story where Spider-Man had cosmic powers that just happened to happen at the same time as all these new villains were coming after Spider-Man. And it's like, oh, he's way more powerful than I was led to believe.
I remember, like I said, I had bought a book here or there. The easiest way for me to get comics before I found local comic book stores was to go to 7-Eleven, or Tiamo or something. And there was always like a rack of comics that may or may not have been in a month out of date. But I would just kind of grab single floppies of this, that, and the other thing. So I would grab a Green Lantern here, a Batman there, or a Spider-Man, or a Fantastic Four. Like, I was definitely not like an avid collector. I was just kind of grabbing stuff where, ooh, pretty colors. This cover looks. Hey, that broad on the cover is scantily clad. I was a horny boy as a child. They knew exactly what they were doing, and I was the right customer. So Storm, with your chest out and your clothes a tatter, hotsy totsy. I will grab this issue of the Fantastic.
I have that issue.
Yeah, do you?
I know exactly which issue you're talking about.
I'm sure you do. But and then I remember talking to one of my cousins, good old Sebastian Piccioni. He was like, if you're really wanting to get into comics, now's the best time. They're doing something called Acts of Vengeance. I'm like, what's the story about? He's like, well, you know how every hero has a villain? Yeah, they all do a do-si-do and swap partners, which would become very popular later in years, but that's not what we're here to discuss. And now unfamiliar villains are fighting with different superheroes, and it's causing all kinds of problems. And that was like the whole premise behind Acts of Vengeance.
Yeah. There was an underlying story, but that's all you really needed.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you what the underlying stories of my life.
Well, I mean,
my kids have depended on it.
I don't even know if some of the issues touched on the underlying story. It was just like, like there's an X-Men issue that I think I read, and I'm not sure if it like actually tied in with the overall event, or if they were just like, hey, the X-Men don't usually fight the Mandarin. Sure.
Right. And that's why I ended up collecting like 1,000 books, because I had to buy all the tie-ins to Acts of Vengeance. That's how they get you, Evan. That's how they get you. That was the point of the last 8 minutes.
I have I've got a spreadsheet of all the Acts of Vengeance titles and which ones I have, which ones I can access online, and I just a local shop had a huge sale, and I dug out an issue of the Punisher where he takes on Dr. Doom.
That seems like a good matchup. Kind of like the Thunderbolts. Kind of like the Thunderbolts in the movie iteration and Sentry.
Yeah.
That is a subject we beat to death on Monday, just so you know. I don't know if you listen to Damn You Hollywood anymore, or if we, like many other people, have driven you off, but that subject came up. Like, who are we going to put together from the last couple of movies to fight Marvel's version of schizophrenic Superman? I know. No one with powers.
Hey, Red Guardian has powers.
Yeah, that was my argument. You're now taking over my role, and I'm Robert. See how that works?
Oh, okay. And yeah, U.S. Agent kind of has powers.
Yeah, they're all super soldiers, and Yelena.
Yeah,
and Ghost. Ghost.
Yeah. She walks through walls and stuff.
And stuff, indeed. Speaking of stuff, tonight's actual topic, other than Evan Bevins and I reminisce about comics, We are talking history of violence.
Wait, is this a backdoor pilot for an Acts of Vengeance podcast?
No, we are
Okay.
going to discuss the statistics about domestic violence in people's homes, beginning with the lesbian population. Now, Evan, I understand you have brought, run podcast. We are talking a history of violence, the comic book first, the graphic novel, and then it was adapted into a movie, and then we will compare and contrast them as we are wont to do. The comic book, A History of Violence, was written by John Wagner and illustrated by Vince Locke. It was originally published in 1997 by Paradox Press and later by Vertigo, which were both imprints of DC Comics. Just as a side thing, before you read any further,
Yes.
What's with DC and the 87 imprints? Like, why would wouldn't one imprint kind of do it for you? Why do we need 87 of these?
I don't know.
Okay.
Look, I researched John Wagner and Vince Locke so that I wouldn't stare dumbly into the camera. I don't know. I mean, Marvel had a few different imprints too at one time. So
I'm not asking you necessarily to do a deep dive into the business side of it. I didn't know if you had sort of a casual understanding of like why these large comic book publishers would have more than one imprint. It's like if you're a record label and you have more than one mini one, it just causes a lot of confusion. Like I can understand like if you're, again, I don't know, like Capitol Records, but you want to do a small record label for just your rap albums, to create a sense of identity. Sure. But I don't know what the difference between a lot of these imprints were, because I feel like every time we do one of these, it's another DC imprint.
I honestly don't know. If I had to guess, reckless speculation, maybe it was if they were trying to tap into an audience and wanted to assure you that there wouldn't be any superheroes come in to ruin your darkness and brooding.
Sure.
Like I remember, maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but I swear I had more than one person say to me in college, I would say, "Oh, I read comics," and they said, "I don't read comics. I read Sandman."
And did you immediately hit them with the nearest hard object you could find?
No, I didn't. But I still complain about them 20 some years later.
Fair enough.
They may or may not have existed, and I may have merged them together in my head. But
well, Evan, I'm glad you don't have a history of violence. Whee! Anyway.
That was a good one, Joey.
It's also the source of the film of the same name, directed by David Cronenberg, the first cinematic adaptation of a work by John Wagner since 1995's Judge Dredd. Oh boy. So tell me about John Wagner and Mr. Locke.
Well, John Wagner is the co-creator of Judge Dredd, and also Vertigo was DC's attempt at A24 style comics, from what I hear.
Thank you, Gavin, with the hot take.
Oh, shoot. I forgot everybody else can see that too. So Wagner, he didn't do a lot of superhero comics, although he was the writing partner of Alan Grant for a while, and I guess they did some Batman. But yeah, his was more like sci-fi kind of stuff. There was one, as I was looking up his bibliography, I was like, this sounds like something Mark would read. It was called Al's Baby, and it was about a gangster who was forced to carry the child of his mafia boss.
Like a boy was carrying a baby?
Yeah, as a surrogate.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, he did a lot of stuff with 2000 AD, Judge Dredd, Strontium Dogs, several things that are on my list of I should probably see what all the fuss is about, because I understand that it did not originate with Mr. Stallone.
That is correct. So what is your if you got more, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And then Vince Locke does have some comic book work, but he's also done a lot of stuff. Hang on, pulled all this up. Not a lot of superhero things. He did some Judge Dredd stories and some sci-fi stuff, but he's got longer credits for role-playing games, like White Wolf publishing some of their games, and did a lot of album covers for Cannibal Corpse, which this may surprise you.
He's the monster responsible for that?
Oh, yeah, apparently so. This may surprise you. I am not very familiar with their work.
No, you're not a fan of like Hammer Smashed Face and oh gosh, there's so many great Cannibal Corpse names. Would you like me to read you a list of Cannibal Corpse?
You know what? I've got the list of album titles here that he did the artwork for,
Will you please read those titles to the audience. They inquiring minds want to know. Want to hear Evan Bevins say the name of Cannibal Corpse albums.
Eaten Back to Life.
Uh-huh.
Butchered at Birth.
Yes.
Tomb of the Mutilated.
A classic.
The Bleeding, which frankly sounds like they weren't even trying at that point.
Cannibal Corpse had kind of given up for a while.
Yeah. The Wretched Spawn.
Uh-huh.
Evisceration Plague.
Oh, highly recommend.
Global Evisceration, which sounds kind of derivative, honestly. So, yeah, good stuff like that. And never have they crossed my playlist.
I was going to say, have you ever had the joy, the unadulterated, visceral, vascular joy of looking at all of the different Cannibal Corpse album covers?
No, I haven't.
If I were to put them on screen, I think we would get kicked off of YouTube.
Oh, well, let's not do that then.
But if you're ever, with your kids and you're wanting to expose them to art of the 80s and 90s that really went into the mind of the heavy metal culture at that point, absolutely sit your impressionable daughters down so they can see these Cannibal Corpse album covers. They are a delight.
Yeah, I think I'll pass.
Alrighty, moving on. Speaking of passing, have you ever before this podcast had you ever read A History of Violence during its years being published?
I had not. I didn't realize that it had only come out in 1997. For some reason, I was thinking it was older. My main experience with A History of Violence before eventually watching the movie was that whenever it was my trivia question along with Road to Perdition, and I was like, oh no, comics aren't just superheroes. Like there's this one called A History of Violence. They made a movie out of it.
Yeah. As long as we've been doing comic strips and I've had to kind of research, I have been really surprised what kind of comic books are out there because they end up being adapted into movies. And it's like, not in 100 years would I have, if I was ever given like a multiple choice question, pick which one of these movies was adapted from a comic book, not in a million years would I have guessed The History of Violence.
And then there are some that are out there that you're like, well, surely that came from a comic book. Like, nope, Meteor Man just sprung fully formed from the mind of
Robert Townsend.
Yeah, Robert Townsend, thank you.
Yeah.
There was a Meteor Man comic afterward, and he's technically part of the Marvel Universe.
And you have like Blank Man, and there's just so many like ridiculous things. But on the opposite side of that, then you have Mystery Men, where you're like, there's no way this came from a comic. Oh my god, it came from something called Flaming Carrot.
I'm still sorry I missed out on that episode.
This is a fun discussion. You were missed. But time nor this podcast waits for no man, Evan Bevins.
Back to Acts of Vengeance. I mean, which also, frankly, would be a good alternate title for A History of Violence.
It would. It definitely would work. All right, so let's get into. I had never read A History of Violence. Like I said, I only realized it was a comic book when I started doing research for, this podcast. Like in general, like what can we talk about it once we get past the Marvel and the DC stuff? And as I said 10 minutes ago, isn't everything DC? It's part of an imprint of some kind. All right.
Yeah, and that's without getting into the ones that started out as something else, got licensed by DC for a while, and then left.
Yes.
Marvel too.
All right, so I have a plot summary here that ChatGPT, good old fancy, did for me. So let's play our game, Evan. Let's see how many mistakes ChatGPT made because I'm too lazy to do this myself. Tom McKenna is a small-town Michigan diner owner whose quiet life is shattered after he kills 2 robbers in self-defense. Hailed as a local hero, Tom gains national attention, but it draws out dangerous figures from his past. Mobsters arrive, claim Tom is actually Joey. Baby. You ever listen to Concrete Blonde?
No, I'm thinking of the Bon Jovi song, Hey Joey.
Oh, that's another good one. A former hitman who disappeared decades ago. Forced to confront his violent past, Tom reveals the truth to his family. The story escalates into a deadly confrontation with his former associates, leading Tom to seek final closure by confronting his criminal brother. The graphic novel explores identity, redemption, and the cost of buried sins. So, I'll go to you first. What did you think of the book?
Well, first of all, he doesn't confront his criminal brother in the comic.
I think that's a euphemism. I don't think the ChatGPT meant literal brother.
Okay, all right, my bad.
His partner in crime.
Okay, yes, that was it. Yeah, it started out strong. It's totally on board with the first issue.
Mm-hmm.
Great sense of tension. The art, little scratchy, wouldn't be my first choice, but fits very well with this story.
Yeah, it definitely has that like pulpy feel to it.
Yes. So excellent buildup of tension. It had been a long time since I watched the movie, but I was like, okay, I remember this. I didn't remember all of it because we'll talk about the changes. But thought it was pretty interesting. Built up a whole world. Then we get to the third chapter or the third issue, and right over the shark it went.
All right, tell me about that. What specifically made you think it jumped the shark?
Well, I mean, you had this great build up where for a while, I mean, if you didn't know what the story was, you're like, do they have the right guy? These mobsters that come looking for him, like, do they really have the right guy? And it's pretty scary because you're like, okay, I read comics where giant monsters pop up and people wear their underwear on the outside and throw buildings with their mind, and these are just
or become buildings.
What was that?
Or become buildings.
Yes. Are you getting ready to read Metamorpho #4 as well?
No, I'm referencing an Iron Fist comic that Jesse and I reviewed years ago, back when that was on Netflix.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't read that one.
He became a building and like fought a giant monster.
Ooh, I like it. Anytime you add in giant monster, I'm
with you, but I draw the line that you turning into a building.
Well, let's just say I could have used a giant monster in Chapter 3 of A History of Violence. But no, I built up the tension. Great, told the story well. Then the flashback in the second chapter was cool, showing exactly how he came to this point, and kind of why he is who he is, why he's on the run, and it was all his friend Richie, his metaphorical brother, who wanted to get revenge for his brother being killed after not giving a cut from his robbery to the local mob boss. So they come up, with this elaborate plan, and you see them developing it. You see them going back and forth, like, "Hey, should we do this?" Plotting it out and pulling it off and all that. And then we see that Richie gets caught, and you're like, "Oh man, Richie's dead." And then somewhere around the end of Chapter 2 or Chapter 3, Tom gets a call from Richie.
Right.
And Richie's alive, and he's been tortured for 20 years.
Alive. He's a potato is what he is.
Yeah. And at that point, I was like, okay, we've just gone a little far here.
I want to weigh in on that because I don't think you're wrong. It almost feels like the writer of this, John Wagner, like had an idea for what because this is a solid premise.
Oh, absolutely.
I love the idea of I kind of like you, where like 2/3 of this book I really like. And so you have this, to restate everything that you just said, but you have this, small town and the small town family man, and everything is just picturesque and all of that. And through no fault of his own, he is shown to be a bad motherfucker. And word gets out about it.
Shut your mouth.
That's right. And it attracts the attention of his past that he tried to bury, his past that he won't even admit to until he is absolutely forced to. Like, as an elevator pitch, that's good stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Mobster goes into, a former criminal ne'er-do-well who had crossed the mob, goes into hiding, reinvents himself, becomes a family man, and through no fault of his own, through an act of defensive violence, a history of violence, if you will, the mob finds him, and now what does he do? He has to protect his family, but he has to own up to the sins of his past, and we are at cross purposes. That's great stuff. Like, if I'm a movie exec, I can see why this got pitched as a movie and it got greenlit. It's good. It's good shit. And then it was like he wrote his book. It was like, go, here's money, go public, go write your book. And he like hands in his manuscript to DC, and they're like, your ending sucks. Like, the kids buy this stuff, like, or young men. You got to rewrite this. You got to give something more pulpy, more interesting. Like, you really got to go over the top with this, and out of a fit of violence, like out of just such frustration, he wrote that ending to this book that I'm like, I'm kind of with you. It's like, all right, this feels a little tacked on. This feels very forced.
Oh, you're waiting for me to say something.
I do eventually stop talking. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I will say that just coincidentally, before I read and watched this, I had watched John Wick 3, which made the movie and even the comic to a certain extent feel like a lighthearted family dramedy.
Yeah, John Wick gets a little morose.
Yeah, I mean, like in this, I understand why everybody's doing what they're doing. I got so irritated with John Wick 3, I wrote a whole unscheduled blog post instead of what I was supposed to be writing with, because it's basically live action itchy and scratchy. But anyway, my point being, like I could understand, I understood everybody's motivations in this, and I think a lot of it was, sort of the idea. Speaking of Iron Fist, one of my favorite comics of all time, there's a panel where it's where Power Man and Iron Fist go undercover as long haul truckers. And there's a point where Iron Fist is beating up a bunch of thugs, and he says, "Violence only begets more violence, as I am now demonstrating." So that was what I got from this, was like, okay, he wants to stop, but he did something, and these people are going to repay that violence, and every act of violence brings more to it.
It runs so deep because it's not that he's hiding from the mob. I mean, he is, but he also doesn't want to be that person anymore. I think as a thematic element, the idea of, are we only our past mistakes? Can we ever be anything else than what we've already done? Can we be an entirely new person? Which is what he's trying to do. He's like, I was a criminal, I was a bad person. Yes, I was running from the mob, but I also don't want to be that guy anymore. It isn't like, I'm running from the mob, and if they find me, I'm gonna kill everybody up in here tonight. It was, he won't even, until they take one of his kids, like, hostage, basically. He won't even admit, no matter how many times he's confronted. And it's one of those where, like, it's not that he changed his face, it doesn't face off, or something ridiculous like that, where, his appearance is entirely changed. Like, he knows when the mob guys show up, he knows who they are. Yeah. And they know who he is. And yes, it's been a few years, but like I saw a picture of myself from about 10 years ago, or a couple years ago. Well, I saw my badge from when I started working, and I've worked in the same place for 10 years. I don't look that different. Like, anyone who saw me 10 years ago who sees me now, they're like, well, you're grayer than you used to be, but your face shape has changed somewhat due to weight, but
still kind of look like Aragorn.
You're still you. You know? And so, like, it's one of those, like, Clark Kent Superman things. It's like, I'm a completely different fella. No, I'm not.
Wait a minute. Did he wear glasses in the flashback? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, exactly. I
should have gone the Wolverine route and put on an eye patch.
Well, it's so funny because I've always laughed at the idea that, glasses will completely change someone's face, or just the mask that goes over the eyes, your rest of your face is fine. Like, I can understand Batman's cowl. It only shows you the mouth. But
You're like, Green Arrow, how did anybody miss that?
Like, we know who you are. Stop it. Poor Robin is like, Batman, I will put on a cowl and a mask and I will be the knight. I am the shadow. And then you will join me, pig hostage, and wear this dark pair of glasses.
Well, but also Robin wasn't wearing pants, so nobody was looking at his face.
It's fair. Why do you have this small child running around in a leotard and a cape? I like that sort of thing. So, anyway, enough about Bruce Wayne's perversions.
Hey, according to the Lego Batman movie, which I consider canon, that was all Robin's idea.
It's fair. I will dress like a clown as to distract attention from you, Batman, and they will shoot at me and not you, and you will come from behind, and we will beat the bad guys. Anyway, yeah, he's still selling it. Is the point of that entire stupid rant? He knows they know who he is, and he's just like, I'm committing to the bit. I'm not giving any of this up, and until they take the kid, the teenage boy, and they're like, we're gonna shoot him. How's that sound? And like, he can't call their bluff. I'm not the guy you're looking for. All right, bang. Case of Ross, hurrah. Like, he's not going to do that. So that's all really, really good stuff. And then, like, when you go to the flashback and you see how it all happened, the nice thing about the book that I like is how well the stuff between him and his wife is handled. Because the wife is like, I understand why you didn't tell me this. I understand you were trying to be a different person, but we have a relationship. You owed it to me to tell me everything, so I knew who I was forming a relationship with. You didn't give me a choice. And he was like, well, I was trying to protect you. And I'm kind of getting a little tired of the I was trying to protect you trope. Like, I understand it's an element of masculinity. Men are supposed to protect their women. We get it. But how many more times do we need to see in popular fiction lying to support protection is not okay?
Although in this case, I think it's probably, he wanted to keep his secret, but I know in the movie, and I think in the comic, he describes Joey as dead, not just I changed my name. That guy's dead.
He can reframe that any way he wants. Joey is very much alive with a new
right. But what I'm saying is I don't know that it was just all motivated out of, well, I've got to protect you. It was, I don't want to acknowledge this portion of my life even existed. And yeah, he can say he wanted to protect her, but it's like, if I tell her this, not only am I acknowledging what I was, but she's not going to stick around.
I'm not projecting what the author did onto you, so please don't take this as me attacking you, but I cannot support the cognitive dissonance of my identity is that person is gone and lost forever. I am a new person. No. You can say that to the extent of I am trying to, almost like a baptism,
Yeah.
People convert to like a new religion, or let's just stick with you become a Baptist, and you were baptized in the water, and you come out, you are clean from your past, and you are a new person.
Rise a new creation.
Right. And I'm all for that. I'm all for turning over a new leaf, being a different person. However, if you are confronted by the mob and they are saying, you were this other guy and that guy owes us money and we are here for recompense and all of that, you can't go, well, I was bathed in the blood of the Lamb and I am a new person now. Sorry. It doesn't work that way.
I'm not saying it works. I'm saying that was his, that may have been part of his rationale.
I get that.
Just if I don't, la la la, I can't hear you. If I don't acknowledge it, it's not real. I'm not saying that's a smart way to handle it or an effective way to handle it. I'm just saying that even if he says, well, I just wanted to protect you, he was doing it for himself as much as for anybody else.
No, I get that. I do struggle with the idea of, like, if somebody knows me from my past, like somebody from New York shows up on my doorstep from Florida, they're like, are you the Mark Radulich? And me going, no. I'm Evan Bevins, and like shut the door and run away.
And they would say, well, that's not a real name.
Right. Look, if you're going to come up with a new identity, don't do a rhyme scheme. Who are you, Stan Lee? Anyway.
That would be alliteration.
Sure. Yes. Like Evan Bevin. Well, Evan Bevins kind of rhymes.
No, it does. But Stan Lee did alliteration.
He did do alliteration.
Peter Parker, Reed Richards.
Yes, I understand. I went to English class.
Bruce Banner.
Yep. You got any more?
Sue Storm.
Okay. Anything else?
Scott Summers.
Is that the last one?
Don't keep encouraging this. I keep going.
Anyway, so all of that stuff I liked. There's definitely a palpable tension for that first chapter of the book, that first third. The second one, I think, is an interesting kind of flashback about his life. And then by the time we get to the third one, it becomes like gonzo violence pornography. And I'm like, I'm not really into this anymore. I was like, get to the end of this. I'm done with this book now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, like I said, it was, the just continuing nature of violence or whatever. But yeah, at that point, it went out of everything. It went out of the realism and the relatability that I think made the first two parts work so well.
The last thing I'll say, and I was starting to say this before, and then we went off on a tangent. I think the best stuff of this book is the conversations between the husband and the wife, and them kind of trying to sort through his desire to be born anew and put his past to bed, and her going, "If you loved me, you are honest with me all the way through, and you give me the opportunity to decide whether or not I still want to be with you. You hiding it takes that agency away from me. It also says to me that that maybe you're not worth staying with, or you wouldn't have you wouldn't have hid this from me." And he was like, as you said, but that part of my life was dead. I didn't feel it has no relevance to who I am today. So why would I bother? It's a very man's argument. In a sense, this is it almost goes without saying, but hear me out. It's a very masculine book because it's definitely permeated with male logic. It has no bearing on what I am today or who I am today. Therefore, what do you need to know about it? And the woman's logic of, I should know because I'm your wife, you dumbass. And this is why men and women bash heads, because you can see both sides of the argument, but they're very, I think, gender influenced. So I'm going to give you the last word here about the history of violence, and we'll move on to the film.
Overall, I liked it. Like you said, it's a great pitch, a great concept, and for most of it, I think he explores it really well. Sometimes you can have a story that's just an awesome idea, and they don't do anything else with it. There's no meat on the bone.
God, there's so many books you and I have read just on this podcast alone. We're like, this was a great pitch. You did nothing with this. But, as an idea, you kind of hit it out of the park.
Yeah, and this it lives up to that. And I mean, sometimes there's a lot of stories where it's like, this is so cool. A lot of time it's mysteries, like, oh, this is so strange. How did this happen? And then when you get to the explanation at the end, you're like, oh, okay, that's not what I was hoping. And like I said, I was on board. And then Richie's alive. Oh, good. And he's been tortured and slowly taken apart for 20 years. Like, I mean, I get vengeance, but come on.
Yeah. First of all, how did you keep him alive for that long in that condition? He'd have died from any number of infections. Like, a nurse that comes in, like, my job is to keep you alive and treat whatever gross infections are going to come from this.
I mean, I did read a book where that was a threat to somebody. They were like, yeah, we're not going to kill you. We're going to do this. And then we're going to go to extraordinary measures to make sure you're still alive. So then we can do this. And
yeah.
I
don't know if they put that kind of love and care into him. The other thing I was going to say is, wasn't that also like an X-Files premise where they kept somebody with no arms, no legs alive just to keep abusing them?
Possibly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you watch the X-Files?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But you don't remember this particular episode?
Well, what comes to mind was the inbreeding episode.
I feel like what I said and what you said come up a lot, especially on my podcast. Weirdos that we are.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, very good. But yeah, I liked it overall. I see why they decided to make it a movie. When we get to the compare and contrast, there's changes that made sense, and then changes that I don't really understand.
The third act, yet again. Well, I'm like, I watched this at night, and I was kind of drifting away from the movie, and then I realized it was over, and I'm like, no, it couldn't have ended after that scene. That makes no sense. What did you run out of film? All right, let's talk. let's talk about it. A History of Violence is a 2005 action thriller, directed by David Cronenberg. And if you don't know who David Cronenberg is, well, you should. His filmography is as follows. He did Scanners, which everybody knows or nobody knows. In 1981, Videodrome, 1983, The Dead Zone from Paramount Pictures. Now, the one that everyone should know him for is The Fly. Have you ever seen The Fly?
I have not.
Oh, you are missing out. This is quality classic. It is like the high watermark in body horror. Jeff Goldblum plays a mad scientist, and Gina Davis plays a woman. And he invents teleportation.
Magic of cinema.
Yes. He invents teleportation, and the idea is we destroy you in one pod and recreate you in the other, which was an actual thing. This drew directly from what was at the time something that was going on in science. That's how they wanted to do transportation, and like you would say in Star Trek, is deconstruct you in one place and reconstruct you elsewhere. I actually brought this up.
But you want to make sure that there's not a bug in the deconstruction.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Is that a fly gets in there, and because the computer didn't know the difference between the fly DNA and the human DNA, it's like, well, this all must be the same thing.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I do know the story. I mean, I didn't think it was about a zipper.
I enjoy you, Evan Bevins. We should do this more often. So I showed. So my son was very interested in this. I showed it to him. And he had exactly the right reaction to it. He was like, oh my God, this is all the way gross. None of this is good. Like, he loved it. He really enjoyed the movie. Much better than Snakes on a Plane. This makes me sad. But, yeah.
Lots of things are better than Snakes on a Plane.
Okay. What, are you another one who doesn't want to watch 90 minutes of people being bit in the dick?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
The third act of A History of Violence, the comic, is better than Snakes on a Plane.
Alrighty. So anyway, well, I'm not going to invite you to the Black History Month podcast. That's for certain. We talked about it during Black History Month. That's why.
No, I figured.
Okay. So anyway, yeah. So David Cronenberg, mostly known
but
for.
You don't want me on there to talk about how my friends and I in high school got a text reading computer program to recite the lyrics to the theme from Shaft.
When we talked about Shaft, I might have been interested in that story, but also, you silly guys, you. So
we can dig it. Anyway, continue.
Yes. So yeah, he did The Fly. He did Naked Lunch, which I can't even find anymore because I was going to talk about that one Pride History Month. He did Crash in 1996. This movie,
96.
This iteration of Crash, yes.
Okay. I know it's not the Oscar winner.
Yeah, no. History of Violence, which we'll talk about momentarily, in 2005. Eastern Promises in 2007 with that movie.
It was another Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah. He did Crimes of the Future in 2022, and then most recently, The Shrouds in 2024. Yeah, David Cronenberg still out there, still making gross movies. That's David Cronenberg. If you're not familiar with his work, you really should be. He's one of the best directors of the last 50 years or so. And written by Josh Olson. It's an adaptation, as we said before, of the book. It stars Aragorn, otherwise known as Viggo Mortensen.
Let me ask you this.
Yes, sir.
Can you see anything with Viggo Mortensen or hear anything about him and not think of Ghostbusters 2?
Viggo. You've been a bad monkey. Maria Bello, Ed Harris, and William Hurt.
Who was nominated for an Oscar for this movie.
Yeah, this movie got all kinds of awards. It was in main competition for the 2005 Palme d'Or. It was put into limited release in the U.S. September 23rd, followed by a wide release September 30th. It has been Evan Bevins. A History of Violence has been described as one of the greatest films of the 2000s and has been named on various greatest of all time lists. It was praised for its performances and screenwriting and atmosphere. William Hurt was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and Olson was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. Mortensen himself praised it as one of the best movies he's ever been in, if not the best. It is also notable for being one of, if not the last, of the major Hollywood films to be released on VHS. Well, isn't that wonderful?
Ah.
It has a budget of $32 million. It made almost twice that with 61.4. Yeah, those are the only two Oscar nominations were Best Supporting Actor and Best Screenplay, which it did not win. However, it won the American Film Institute Top 10 Movie of the Year. William Hurt won for Best Supporting Actor at the Austin Film Critics Association Award. David Cronenberg won Best American Film at the Bodil Awards. He won Best Director at the Central Ohio Film Critics Association Award. Maria Bello won Best Supporting Actress for same. He won Best Director at the Chicago Film Critics Association Award. Maria Bello, same. Best Actress. It won some Directors Guild of Canada awards, rather. French Syndicate of Cinema Awards. It won a Golden Schmoes Award. Very prestigious, yes. And it was won and nominated for a bunch of.
And if you're going to get a schmoes, you want the golden one.
Indeed. So that's that. I'd never seen it before this podcast. It was just one of those where I think I'd heard a lot about it. Obviously, it was making noise back in 2005, but for whatever the reasons, I was busy. I'd never seen it, and I guess it never occurred to me that I should. It's not one of those movies where people are like, "Oh my god!" Like there are certain movies, especially if you talk to enough, cinema snobs. It's like, The Big Lebowski. Everyone needs to see The Big Lebowski. Another one I have not seen, but everyone talks about it.
Now, Mark, you know how much I love movies with some language.
Yeah,
that may be my guiltiest pleasure movie. I adore that movie, and they swear more than you do.
Fair.
But the thing is, if you made it a PG movie, still hilarious. Although if you watch the TV edit, it makes no sense at all.
Dazed and Confused is another one. Almost Famous gets some discussion amongst film people. You go back a little bit further, obviously, like your Godfather movies and stuff like that. I never hear anyone talk about
Follow That Bird.
Sure, absolutely. I never hear people talk about A History of Violence, though. Like it's never been one that people are like, "Oh my God, you've never seen A History of Violence? You must watch A History of Violence." Like as many accolades as it has, as good as it is, I've never heard anyone really talk about it in the years since its release in 2005. How about you?
Yeah, like I said, my main thing for it was like, hey, this is a comic book movie too. It was recommended to me by somebody. I watched it. I liked it, but I didn't. I hadn't watched it again since until you said, "Hey, why don't we do A History of Violence?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've always been meaning to read the comic." I was a little surprised at some of the accolades it got, not because it's bad at all. There's a lot I liked about it, but I don't know. I describe it as it's pretty good.
Yeah. So the plot of this thing, now the summary here is Tom Stahl is a mild-mannered diner owner in small-town Indiana who becomes a media sensation after killing two men in self-defense. The fame brings Carl Fogarty, a mysterious scarred man who insists Tom is actually Joey Cusack, a Philadelphia mobster. As pressure mounts, Tom's violent instincts resurface, straining his relationship with his wife and family. After a deadly standoff at home, Tom travels to Philadelphia to confront his mobster brother Richie, killing him and his guards. He returns home to an uncertain welcome, leaving the audience to wonder whether forgiveness is possible or if violence has permanently defined him. I have some real difficulties with this movie. I'm going to be honest with you, Evan.
Okay.
It's not bad. I'm not a crazy person. It's a very well done movie, very well acted, interestingly paced, very, very grim. I think, which should go without saying. There's just some really odd choices in this movie, and I don't want to jump around too much, but I can't get past this one scene, and I never understood the point of it, because I remember I have to now go and look at the parent guide before I show my kids anything, because I've made the mistake in the past of not doing that and oh, watch the cinema classic. Oh my God, tentacle porn. You're like, okay, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. So
I'm trying to figure out which cinema classic that is.
Follow That Bird, as a matter of fact. I
No,
don't know if you know that.
How dare you? we've gotten off on enough tangents, so I won't launch into my soliloquy on Follow That Bird. But how dare you?
But my point is, like, there's stuff that like I'll show them, and I'm like, well, this will be fine to show you, or something I haven't seen in a while, or I haven't seen ever. But like, I can't imagine this will be that bad, and then it ends up being something I don't want them to see, and I have to look at them and go, I'm sorry. So I will now check out the parenting guide to see what this is. And I remember looking at the parent guide for A History of Violence because I had them that weekend and I had to watch the movie, so I figured I might watch it with them, see what they think of it. And they're like, well, in the sex part of the parent guide on IMDb, there's a scene where Viggo Mortensen has violent sex with his wife on a staircase. Some would call it sexual assault. I would call it sexual assault.
Wait, are we really going to have the part where I justify that scene?
I would love to hear you justify that scene.
Well,
before you do, just to give proper context, let me see if I can find. Okay. After Tom gets out of the hospital, the local sheriff Sam expresses his concern and suspicion. Just as he is about to confess, Eddie lies to Sam and convinces him to leave. The couple then gets into, and this is hyperlinked, a domestic dispute, culminating in, quote, violent sex. I am not comfortable describing the scene.
Yeah. And let me say, when I say justify, I can understand the rationale for including it. I don't think it was necessary.
Okay.
But because I was watching this and I'm like, what the heck? Because my first thought was, well, that and the earlier scene where she dresses like a cheerleader is completely has no utility for the story whatsoever. But
there's a lot of that in this movie where I'm just like, why is this in here? And it's like adaptation is an art form. It's very rare you will find a complete page to screen adaptation a la the cartoon to the live action Beauty and the Beast, where they literally just reshot that movie as live action, changed nothing.
Well, yeah, because I mean that was my argument with Watchmen, even though obviously there was some stuff they changed, but a lot of it was like just right out of the comic, and I'm like, okay, but I already read and saw that, so why do I need that?
Yeah, why are you you're not in any way elevating the medium. You're not in any way elevating the material by doing this.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, exactly. So I understood like beefing this up and doing stuff with the teenage kid, for example, getting into his life a little bit and the bullying that goes on.
I actually like the kid. I like the son in the comic better.
Fair,
he seemed like a real person.
Okay, I'm not gonna argue with you there, but I can see why that's in here versus what's in the comic.
Yeah.
I can see why they left out almost entirely, I think, the flashback to why he changed his identity. Fine, sure. You don't want to distract from the narrative the way the book does. You just kind of plow through this. It's enough to know that he takes ownership of his past and says, yes, I am that guy, and now they have to deal with that. We don't need to see what's in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. I get it. To set this up, and I don't want to be too graphic about it. I don't want to make a joke out of it, believe it or not, and I really don't want to talk about it for that long. But she's not thrilled that he's kept this from her, that his mob past, and she's even less thrilled that because of his mob past, he's put her and the two kids in danger. And I think she's rightfully angry, and she doesn't want to deal with him, and she's trying to get away from him, and he's chasing her up the stairs. And he's grabbing her, and then there's like a switch that gets flipped between the two of them, and they have sex on the stairs. By the flimsiest of margins, and I know people that wouldn't even give it that much credit. This is the barest definition of consensual, but by a hair's breadth. It is rough and uncomfortable to watch, and that's coming from me, your witness.
Like I said, I think that scene, and actually I got it from the library, and the disc froze, and I thought I just missed like a little snippet. I actually missed the scene where the bully confronts the son in the locker room and the cheerleader outfit scene.
Okay.
So then I pulled it up on Amazon, and I'm like, okay, I want to make sure I see it. Like, that was always, you know how much I enjoy graphic sex, graphic violence, and pervasive language. You know how much I like those things, but it always bothered me to watch an edited version of a movie because I didn't know what the original was.
Sure.
Like, I don't want that stuff, but I want to know what the original movie was. I don't want, well, I started to make a Big Lebowski reference, but you wouldn't get it. But like at one point I watched the Big Lebowski on USA, and they just cut 20 minutes out of the movie. So I don't like, not knowing what I missed, even if it's something that I'd rather not see. So I pulled it up on Amazon. I watched it. I think if there was an argument for those scenes, it was to show, the depth of their relationship and affection for each other physically in the first scene. Again, she could have walked in her cheerleader outfit, then they cut to them in bed together talking, accomplished the same thing. So this other scene is her with who he used to be, and like, not that makes anything he does okay, but she hits him first, and that sort of flips the switch. Again, doesn't make any of it okay at all.
No.
But I think
I'm laughing because it reminded me of like a Family Guy bit. Like, I'm a busy businesswoman who's too busy for anything. It's like, I have the answer to all your problems is my penis. Like, no, it's oof, yuck.
Yeah. So I don't think that was okay. I certainly don't think it was needed, but I think the argument would be it's showing like her and him with what she's discovered about him and his violent nature, and whether that can coexist. I don't know. I thought about this in more detail. And I was like, I'm probably not going to be the guy saying, well, here's what I think they were doing with that. I'm going to be the guy saying, yeah, there's too much sex in this movie. But
raunchy comedy sex romp, a history of violence.
Again, having watched John Wick 3, but no. So yeah, it was wrong. It was uncomfortable. It was unnecessary. But I think like those two were kind of supposed to play off each other.
Okay. I did this on the show with Dorian, speaking of sex romps. Not with Dorian. We talked about it. We just talked about it. We talked about sex romp movies, not one with each other. This is weird. Moving on. I did a bit on the last triple feature. And I really wanted to get in depth with the scene between Bo Derek and Dudley Moore from the movie 10. And I said, didn't trust my own memory of things. I wanted to give it real serious consideration. So I threw a prompt in the chat GPT, and I kind of read it back to him, and they said, okay, now it's fresh. We can discuss this. I just did that here while we were back and forth on this. And the prompt was, describe in detail and explain the point of the staircase sex scene in A History of Violence. Okay. I'm going to read some of this to you so that we can bat this around for a bit. The staircase sex scene in A History
I'm sorry, I should have just said, you're right, Mark. It was unnecessary. Why? Why did I do this?
I can skip this if you want.
It's your show.
Okay. The staircase sex scene in A History of Violence is one of the most emotionally and thematically charged moments in the film. It takes place after Tom Stahl is fully revealed to be Joey Cusack, a former mob killer who has been living under his new identity. His wife, Maria Bello, now knows the truth, and once their loving, stable relationship has been ruptured by violence, lies, and betrayal. So following a series of escalating violent confrontations and the killing of Tom's former associates, Tom returns home emotionally and physically damaged. The couple, still reeling from the psychological trauma, has an intense confrontation at the bottom of the stairs. Without speaking much, they begin to violently and almost animalistically have sex on the staircase. It's not romantic, it's desperate. Physical and raw, there's no comfort in the act. It's not a reconnection in the traditional sense, but a collision of grief, anger, fear, and desire. Unlike the earlier tender scene in the film, one features playfulness and intimacy. The moment is full of tension. Edie is both repelled by and drawn to the man she thought she knew, and Tom is caught between his identities of expressing everything he can't articulate in words. through physicality. The camera lingers uncomfortably, not glamorizing the moment, but forcing the audience to sit with its emotional complexity. I think that's why I was having trouble with this, was the film is very, very careful to not cross a boundary, a very important boundary, but it is so close. Like I said, other people's interpretation of this is it absolutely crossed the boundary. There's no excusing any of what happened here.
Yeah.
And I think that's the power of that scene.
It. I was saying this is why I think they thought it was necessary.
It wins the award for being one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever seen. That's coming from me. Okay. I think what started this rant an hour and a half ago was why it needed to be in the movie, was my question.
And I don't think it needed to be.
Yeah. I'm not. I mean, I guess I was about to say, like, I don't tell other people how to do their art. Sure, we do. We do it all the time. We constantly rewrite movies here. I think if someone hands me a script and that scene's in there, I was like, there's no other way we can get this done without having to do this. Really? There was no other way to explore what's happening in this company. The fracturing of their relationship, the immense distrust now that what he's done has created. There was no other way to explore the psychology of being both repelled and drawn to somebody who is violent and unpredictable. Really? There was no other way to do this without them having an almost sexual assault on a staircase? Like, this is... I guess if the intent is to make the viewer feel somewhat gross, like, succeeded, and that's the only way, that's the only justification you need to have it in the movie. This is where I've landed with this, is if movies are supposed to make you feel something and that scene's supposed to make you feel like possibly walking into traffic, that's its justification for being there. Well done then. Mission accomplished.
But, just like I said, they could have cut away with the earlier scene. She could have slapped him. He could have grabbed her, made us uncomfortable. Then they kind of kiss. Then they separate. I mean...
So there's a line in here. There was the ChatGPT always overachieves here. I'm not going to read all of this, especially because I've seemed to annoy you. But
what do you mean?
You seemed annoyed, so I don't want to press further. Like, I should have agreed with them. Yeah.
No, I mean that was partly done for humor. I was just like, okay. We're talking about this more than I meant to, and
I'm Mark. Have we met?
Yeah.
You knew what you were getting into. I do like the conclusion paragraph that it wrote here, and I'll share with you, and then I really will move this on. The staircase scene is not about... Dude, you know how many times we've done this, and you and I just looked at each other like we have nothing to talk about? For the first time in the history of comics, if I actually have something I want to talk about. Okay. Stop picking on me.
You may yelling
at me. All right. The staircase scene is not about eroticism. No shit. It's about the unraveling of intimacy when built on illusion, which I kind of like. I like that line. I like that interpretation of it. I think it's more my personal comfort level that I'm having a problem with, and I'm now projecting that into why does this need to be in the movie? Why is this thing that's bothering me here? Take it out, and I need to take a step back and go, no, you can have uncomfortable stuff and it can be there. And God knows I make this argument when somebody else says something is uncomfortable. I go, fuck you. Be uncomfortable. That's the purpose of cinema. Well, now it's happening to me, and I have to now take my licking. Well, there's nothing else to talk about with this movie, so let's move on. No, I'm just kidding.
but I still want to compare and contrast.
Well, I have to talk about the way this fucking movie ends, because this is another thing that really bothers me. Again, it was late at night. I was somewhat starting to lose interest in the movie, but after he goes to
Philadelphia
to confront the issue, and I'm going to tag you in here, but my understanding is that there was kind of a long confrontation which just ends with him killing everybody in the room, and Finn, like, we're done here, which was an odd choice.
He goes back to see his brother, and they hug and touch foreheads for an uncomfortably long time, and his brother, we find out, played by William Hurt, is a mob guy who's probably not as high up as he could be because his brother, tried to gouge out Ed Harris's eye with barbed wire 20 years ago.
Keep going. I just gotta go AFK for a second.
Okay. So yeah, he what? Okay. So they talk, they reminisce, and he's Tom/Joey says, "Okay, hey, what can I do here to make this up to you?" And Richie says, "Well, you gotta die." And so then he brings in, I think it's Ruben, who looks like every low-level flunky who gets beaten up and shot by the hero in every movie. Tries to strangle him, but Viggo Mortensen, or Tom/Joey, is almost as hard to kill as John Wick, and nobody gives him 10 minutes.
Dog with the bone you are this episode with John Wick, my friend.
I'm sorry. Well, anyway. They don't give him 5 minutes to catch his breath while they... Anyway, okay, forget John Wick. They don't do a good job of killing Tom/Joey. And we find out that maybe the reason his brother is not as high up in the Philadelphia mob is because he's a really crappy shot. Because after Tom/Joey kills everybody else in the room, William Hurt pulls out a gun and misses him from as far away as I am from the screen right now. And then let's see. Oh, and then Joey/Tom locks him out of his house, kills the rest of the folks, and when he comes back in, he just shoots his brother right in the head. Then he goes home.
Feels anticlimactic is the point I was trying to make.
Yeah, it is. Although the scene at the end, where they're just sitting there and no one's saying anything, and then the little girl just goes and gets her dad a plate. I don't know. I kind of like that.
That I like. When he returns to the family, they are forever changed by this entire experience. He'll never be the man he was. It's like, he's died again, essentially. Joey Cusack died, Tom Stahl died, and now there's this new guy sitting at the table that nobody knows quite what to make of him. Was how I took that scene. And I liked that idea of it.
And then the little girl, she's like, "He's still my dad." Gets him a plate.
Yep.
Son hands him the pot roast.
That's kind of my point. That all that stuff I liked. It's everything before that, which it just, like, the book draws a lot of this out. There's like more hero moments to it. It doesn't quite feel like he walks into a room, there's a conversation, everyone dies, and we're done here. Like, that seemed like, keep going. That seemed like a weird take to me.
Yeah, the book. One of the things I liked about the book is that the stuff he does is more believable. Like this got tagged on IMDb as with the one-man army tag, and like especially that scene, where he takes out all his brother's goons and everything. He's just like this unstoppable force. And in the comic, like, he's not a hitman. He's not a mob enforcer. He's a guy who was, did some petty crime.
So he was a thief, wasn't he?
What's that?
He was a thief, wasn't he?
Yeah. And he helps his friend out. His friend wants to get revenge for the people that killed his brother, and he wants to get money so his grandma can have that operation. And that sounded sarcastic, but that was his motivation.
He hasn't got the money for the mortgage on the farm.
And so he gets away from I can't remember. I don't know why they changed so many names from the comic to the movie. But he gets away from, for lack of a better description, Ed Harris. He's a survivor. He's not this unstoppable killing machine. He's a survivor. And then, when he confronts the guys at his house, he does what he needs to do, but he doesn't just flip a switch and end everyone. And then with the the mobster's son that he and his friend killed, and then the son has been going after them and keeping Richie alive all this time. You know, he does what he needs to do to survive, to protect his family. He's not this, you know, unstoppable action hero, and that I liked better in the comic than the movie. Now, I liked that we didn't have what was left of Richie and all that stuff. I thought
I was good without there being the man that was turned into a potato.
Yeah, I liked that choice of changing it, and I agree with you. We didn't need to have the flashback. We didn't need to see everything that happened, but in the comic, through seeing that, and they could have, I think, still accomplished this without doing the full flashback. You saw like how Joey became Tom and why. And in this, it was just like, well, I used to be Jean-Claude Van Damme, but bad, and now I'm not.
Yeah, I think also, and this is a movie structure
Which is
thing.
what reminded me of John Wick. Okay.
This will be the last thing I say, and then we can compare them, and then, I have this problem. I mentioned this with the first Dune movie and some others, Red Hulk and this latest iteration of Captain America. There's this thing that happens in movies now where we introduce essentially the central bad guy in the third act. And I don't love that. Because I don't think it's an emotionally satisfying ending for anybody watching the thing that actually thinks about this. If you don't have a bad guy from the start of this thing, how am I supposed to feel when you do away with him at the end when I haven't had the entire movie to experience him as the bad guy? You know, Ed Harris was the bad guy in a History of Violence, and we do away with him about midway through. And then there's this whole third act with William Hurt, and who gives a shit? I never had time to get to know William Hurt. I don't have time to experience William Hurt and all the bad things he's doing. So when he offs him, I'm like, I don't have an emotional connection to the bad guy. I don't have a rooting interest in this. Yeah. You're made to entirely have a rooting interest by empathizing with or sympathizing with Tom, Viggo Mortensen's character, who already is problematic. Did I mention the thing about the staircase earlier? So when he kills everybody at the end, this film rests entirely on whether or not that third act works. Now, clearly it does, or he wouldn't have been nominated for as many. I mean, at least his performance makes it work. Whether or not structurally it works is, I guess, remains to be seen. But I don't think a History of Violence is a bad movie. I'd be a crazy person to say so. It's very well acted. It's interestingly paced. I think the themes carry it over the finish line. But there are some plot structure problems here, and that's the biggest one.
I can't disagree with you, but I would say in this, because even though it doesn't have the same villain, which is, I can't figure out how to describe William Hurt in this, because it seems like there's something wrong with him, and I don't.
Jared Leto from Suicide Squad.
Yeah, maybe it. Like I don't want to make fun of people who actually have some sort of physical or mental issue that causes them problems, but I don't think he didn't advance in the mob because his brother screwed something up. I don't think he's very bright or stable.
Yeah.
He seems like somebody who thinks he's a lot more dangerous than he really is. But as far as the introduction of the villain, that structure is in the comic too, because it's the random guys just going through killing people, and the opening to the comic is pretty rough, and then you get to the opening to the movie, which is somehow even worse. And so then you've got those guys, and then the mob comes in, and then it's Ed Harris, and then he's gone, but it's still not over, which I think was part of the story in both of these. Is okay, he hid from his past, it couldn't stay buried, so he took that out. But there's still more coming. There's still more consequences to his action, to his history of violence, if you will. Right. So I understand what you're saying about that. And yeah, in Captain America, you had 3 different villains, none of whom ever really was fully realized. But this, I think it was that wave after wave of just the violence that he did. There's no easy way out of it. So I think that's why they did it that way. But I understand what you're saying, and yeah,
Well, Batman v Superman, I think that does it in an interesting way because the villain is Lex Luthor. He's the villain the entire time, but because Lex Luthor can't fight Superman, he sends down Doomsday.
Mm.
You can get away with that when your final boss is a monster, and because your actual villain can't be in the final conflict for whatever reason.
But Richie, except for one passing reference partway through the movie, we didn't even know he had a brother.
Right.
Yeah, there's nothing setting him up for that. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I just said to a certain extent, I think there's a reason they did it that way, but they could have done more to set him up other than just, hey, there was a guy named Richie, and then after Ed Harris is dead and the stairway scene and all that, he gets a phone call like, hey, it's me, it's Richie. I'm the boss.
So I asked about key differences between the graphic novel and the film, and I thought it was going to give me a narrative, and I guess if I'd asked it to, it would have, but instead, it thought, here, let me just give you a list. So they changed the protagonist's name from McKenna to Stahl, which was weird, as you said. The location from Michigan to Indiana. The tone, the graphic novel is noir, pulpy crime drama. The film is a psychological thriller with art house pacing. I couldn't agree with that more. Reveal of identity. Tom reveals his true past willingly. In the movie, Tom denies his identity until pushed by threats.
Now that I thought was really cool because I knew the story, but you're over halfway through the movie before you know for sure that he is Joey. I mean, they left enough room that like it could just be this awful case of mistaken identity.
Right. The antagonist, mobsters from New York, and his brother Richie. In the movie, Carl Fogarty and his mobster brother Richie Cusack, played by William Hurt. The violence is brutal but grounded. The violence in the movie is stylized, sudden, and shocking. The ending, Tom returns home but remains psychologically tormented. Tom returns home to a quiet dinner table, uncertain if redemption is possible. The themes of the book are identity, guilt, and the consequences of violence. The themes of the movie are suppressed violence, duality of man, moral ambiguity in domestic life. Let me tell you about that moral ambiguity in domestic life, man. I don't know how many people are actually struggling with, how many men, I'm going to keep this just with men. I don't know how many men who are domesticated are actually struggling with that, but Hollywood seems to have a real bone to pick and some real frustration with projecting that onto men with domesticated life. And if you're like, what are you talking about? Like American Beauty, for example, Kevin Spacey, like we're all Kevin Spacey, right? We're all just hating our wives, hating our children, hating middle class life, and we all want to bang a high school kid. I hate to tell Hollywood, most men like their life and would really appreciate it if if the women in their life also liked it too. That's more of the problem. We're not all like gosh, we hate that we chose this life. No, we're all, many of us are quite satisfied.
I mean, I hated Kevin Spacey in that stupid plastic bag.
Fair. Then he did K-Pax. Remember that?
Oh yeah, I've got another long story about K-Pax too, but
another day.
Yeah.
I'll bring you on and do a triple feature of all terrible Kevin Spacey movies.
But I lost what I was going to say. I'm glad this isn't live and we can edit it.
It's all right.
Yeah.
Anything else about any bits here of the history of violence, the book to the comic?
I did. I said, and I was only half joking. I did kind of like his kid maybe not like better.
Mhm.
I found his kid more relatable in the comic, like the part where they're in the hospital and they're trying to decide, like, well, at least if Ed Harris is dead, nobody else can identify me, so maybe it's over, but or maybe I'll have to tell them, what I did, and the son's like, well, that won't work because they'll get you in prison, Dad. And he's like, yeah, thanks, Buzz, appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I could see myself saying that, like, oh yeah, well they'll knock you off. I don't know. I just his son was less dramatic and more like a dumb teenager.
As
In
adapt- as adaptations go, I think this is one of the better ones that we've talked about. At least I the changes from the book to the movie don't make the book worse, I'm not sitting here acting like I don't understand why you did this. I mean, some of the stuff, like, who cares if the name? Like, I don't understand why the name had to change, but who
yeah,
cares if it did?
I don't get that, and I mean, I'm not sure that what they did with Richie in the movie was the best idea, but it's better than Richie in the comic.
Yeah. All right.
My main problem with it again was
Mhm.
that in the book he was a human being pushed to extremes by some poor choices, but also by circumstances, and then he gets drawn back in. And in the movie, he was a super soldier.
Yeah. But I also think that's a common, like, modern movie trope
Yeah.
is, the invincible gun fu John Wick, killing machine.
Do we have to keep bringing up John Wick, Mark?
I'm sorry, I have dog with a bone. Um, but I do. That'll be the last thing I say on this, and then I think I'm done. I do think that we talk about, like, boys' power fantasies. I think, like, men have power fantasies too, and, like, what men are not necessarily fantasizing about, upending their entire fucking family and committing a felony, sexual felony, so much as, the idea of that we are this all powerful, Terminator killing machine, and we can take on armies of people and protect our families and be heroic. I think that's more in line with modern guys than not. And I think it's why John Wick resonates with a lot of guys as much as he does. Like, you can project yourself onto John Wick and be like, I would love to be like that kind of guy who just, like, fights a building full of people and wins somehow.
Yeah, I can understand that. And I do like that. It's called A History of Violence. It's not a glorification of violence. Like,
Yeah.
at no point was it like, watch how cool he kills these guys. It's ugly.
Yeah, the murder has weight on his soul, which is not a
Mhm.
common thing you see in Hollywood movies.
Yeah, yeah. So I did think that was well handled. There's a whole
There's no glee here.
yeah. There's a on the DVD. There's a deleted scene which I'm glad they took out, mainly because it's like a dream sequence where Tom shoots Ed Harris and just,
Mhm.
like, blows this massive hole in his chest, and then Ed Harris keeps talking to him and shoots him, and he wakes up. But where it would have been placed in the movie confirms way earlier that he is Joey.
Mhm.
But they had this whole thing about how they filmed it and stuff, and why and taking it out. But Ed Harris said, as gruesome as it is, it's kind of David's protest against violence as opposed to celebrating it. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, one thing I hate is a movie where they get their PG-13 rating because 36 nameless people die bloodlessly. Like, I don't love, graphic violence and everything, but, like, if you're going to have violence, it should be ugly. Like when we talked about In Bruges,
Yeah.
that's ugly. And it
Mhm.
should be. It's not something to celebrate and delight in. Unless it's Hot Shots Part 2.
Sure.
But so yeah, I appreciated that.
All right, I think that is the end of our comic strip here of History of Violence. I really enjoyed this conversation. We've done a lot of these, and some of them, the movies don't give us a whole lot to talk about. It's just like, it was fun. This was nice. Whether or not we agreed to me is immaterial. I think the fact that it hit us differently and we were able to talk about that is what made it worth having the discussion. So I enjoyed this tonight.
Definitely not one to go, well, I like the idea. I wish they had done it better.
Yeah.
Not what happened.
For once on this show, we're not just like, it could have been better. So, this past week on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, We did, Harry and I did an Indie-Siders. We looked at John Cena's heel turn, WrestleMania predictions, and then we reviewed House of Glory, City of Dreams. Monday, Robert and I reviewed the new Minecraft movie, and we had a lengthy discussion about children's behavior, unparented children in the movie theater, which is still...
Oh, I got a story about that too.
But, do you seriously?
When I went to see the re-release of Empire Strikes Back,
yeah,
I was there, and there were these kids, like 4 little boys, not sure how old, but definitely not teenagers, and not very close. And they were up front fighting with their lightsabers, and one of them turned and poked the screen with his lightsaber. And his dad, this was before the lights were down, before the movie started, and his dad in the back of the theater goes, "Oh, don't do that." And the kid turns around and looks at his dad and says, "Shut up, Dad, or I'll kill you." And you know what his dad said?
Nothing.
I don't know. That was long before I had kids, but I'm like, that seems like a bad choice.
I don't think my father would have said anything either. He'd have been too busy beating me to death in front of the theater, just pummeling me.
So, and I can say that because I have never, ever made a mistake or a bad call while parenting.
The only mistake I've ever made is not reading the parenting guide before you show my kids a movie. But that's the only one. Other than that, I'm perfect. But I'm not as perfect as Evan Bevins.
So we are here. We can judge.
Sure, absolutely. Which is a good Christian thing to do, is judge people.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're done with all that snark. Speaking of which, myself and Dorian Price, we looked at 80s raunchy sex comedies, hard body movies, is what we call them. And in the spirit of that, we reviewed Hard Bodies, 10, and Spring Break. Tomorrow, I will be on source material talking more comic books. This time, we will be doing Joker, Killer Smile, The Joker Presents a Puzzle Box, and The Joker War, because I have to overload Jesse with books to read. Monday, we are looking at Warfare, the new A24 movie that is shot in real time during a battle sequence in, I believe, either Iraq or Afghanistan. This Wednesday, I will be on an Alexis Run TV party. We'll be looking at The Bear Season 3. And then we are kicking off WrestleMania weekend with a look at The West Wing Season 4. That is the 10th time I've made that joke.
All right, well.
Evan Bevin, show us where you piss from.
Well, you can find my writing, if you like my ideas, but find my voice grading, at *51.blogspot.com, where, this may surprise you, my latest post is about John Wick 3. Entitled, "I Think That's Enough John Wick for Me." Which is the rare 2 movie posts in a row, because, as you might expect, prior to John Wick and A History of Violence, I watched the 1984 Care Bears movie for the first time in a long time.
And I bet you loved every minute of it.
No, it's no Fall of That Bird. But it's a movie that I remember very distinctly as a kid, and so I was curious to see, what it looks like now.
You ever run on your belly and magic marker and draw yourself a pretty picture and then stare at the mirror and go, Care Bear stare?
No, I was more of a Care Bear Cousins guy. I'm like, why just bears? Why not a whole forest of animals, all with heart in their name?
It was like lions and pandas and shit, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a raccoon. The rabbit was my favorite because he was basically like the Flash, so it was like a superhero.
Was the raccoon's belly a picture of a trash can?
No, it was a light bulb.
Even better.
As you might expect.
Yeah.
Anyway, but usually what I write about is comics. I just finally, not too long ago, finished going through the Amalgam books, where Marvel and DC put their characters in a blender and served up 24 delicious, crazy concoctions. And with Doctor Doom taking over the world in Marvel Comics right now, I looked at the first time he did that, which was a beautifully insane 2-part story in Supervillain Team Up number 14 and Champions number 16. Can't recommend it enough. Dr. Doom takes over the world and gets bored.
I like it better when Dr. Doom is bored. Like when he's sitting in Latvia or Latveria, and he's just, kind of like Conan at the end of Conan the Destroyer.
Yeah, he's
I like the version of Dr. Doom.
Well, then you would love. Then you would love this. Magneto shows up and is like, "Hey, Doom, we should team up and take over the world." And Doom's like, "I already rule the world. I don't really need you here." And Magneto's like, "What? No, you don't." And he goes, "No, I do. Seriously, kneel." And Magneto says, "I will," and drops the one knee. And it just goes from there, because like Mr. Fantastic doesn't know Doom's won, nobody knows, and he's like, "Well, this isn't satisfying at all."
That's great. That's actually
it is magnificent.
Writing. Yeah. What book is this?
Supervillain Team Up number 14 and Champions number 16.
Okay, I might actually have to go look those up.
Yeah, I'll. I mean, I can send you the link, but it's one of those, like, I read it a long time ago, and it was always like, hey, I read this cool story once, and then when the new series came out, I was like, I should go back, and I was thinking, oh, I hope this isn't one of those where like I build it up in my mind and then I read it again, and it was like, oh no, that's not no, it's great. If you've ever wanted your comics to have a Jimmy Carter guest appearance, you've got it.
Well, Jimmy Carter guest appearance is the phrase to face here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. So, for Evan Bevins, who will be back in a month, exactly a month to the day, we will be looking at the Bruce Willis movie, The Surrogate, and the comic that inspired it, adapted from even. So, for Evan Bevins, good to his mother, I'm going to go eat my lunch that got here from Outback while Evan was talking. Be well, be safe, and behave.